The hotel lobby gleamed with marble and gold fixtures. I adjusted my grip on the overnight bag while Blake handled the paperwork. 32 years old, and I still felt like a teenager sneaking away for the weekend. Terrace suite with jacuzzi, the clerk confirmed, sliding 2 keycards across the granite counter. Champagne service is available until midnight. Blake pocketed both cards without offering me one. His fingers drummed against the counter, a habit I'd noticed more lately. Something restless lived behind his calm exterior, something he never quite voiced. The terrace faces west, the clerk continued. Perfect sunset views from the hot tub. That sounds wonderful, I said, though Blake had already turned toward the elevators. The suite exceeded the photos. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened onto a private terrace where steam rose from the jacuzzi like morning mist. The space felt intimate, secluded. Blake set down our bags and immediately pulled out his device, checking messages. Work? I asked. Always. But his thumb moved too quickly, scrolling through something that held his attention. The screen's glow caught his eyes differently tonight, sharper, more focused. I unpacked while he wandered the suite, testing light switches, examining the terrace door locks. His inspection felt thorough, almost calculated. When he rejoined me, his expression had shifted to something I couldn't quite read. "This place is perfect," he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. Exactly what we needed. I leaned into his warmth, wondering what exactly we needed that we hadn't been able to find at home. The evening air carried hints of jasmine and chlorine. I'd changed into my swimsuit while Blake arranged dinner reservations. The jacuzzi beckoned, its surface dancing with reflected city lights. "The water looks incredible," I said, dipping my toes in. The temperature was perfect, hot enough to relax every muscle. Blake appeared with an ice bucket and bottle. The champagne's label caught the terrace lighting, elegant script promising celebration. "Dom Perignon," he said, "for tonight." "What are we celebrating?" His smile carried secrets. "New experiences." I settled into the bubbling water while he worked the cork free. The pop echoed off the surrounding buildings, sharp and festive. He poured 2 glasses, the bubbles catching the light like tiny stars. "To exploration," he said, raising his glass. We clinked crystal against crystal. The champagne tasted crisp, expensive. Blake sat on the jacuzzi's edge, his legs dangling in the water beside me. "I need to grab something from inside," he said, after finishing his glass. The concierge mentioned they have special amenities for the terrace suites. "What kind of amenities?" "Surprise." He kissed my forehead. "Relax. Enjoy the bubbles. I'll be right back." The terrace door slid shut behind him. I sank deeper into the water, letting the jets massage my shoulders. The city sprawled below us, windows twinkling like a scattered constellation. This felt like the most romantic evening we'd shared in months. The champagne made me drowsy, content. I closed my eyes and listened to the water's gentle hum. The water embraced me like silk. Bubbles traced paths along my skin, tiny effervescent kisses that made me forget the stress of work, of routine, of the small disappointments that had been accumulating between Blake and me. Minutes passed. The terrace remained empty except for the steam rising around me and the distant hum of traffic far below. I'd expected Blake to return quickly, but the solitude felt luxurious. When was the last time I'd simply existed without agenda or obligation? Footsteps approached from inside the suite. I opened my eyes, expecting to see Blake with whatever surprise he'd mentioned. Instead, a stranger emerged onto the terrace. He was tall, dark-haired, probably mid-30s. He carried an ice bucket and a fresh bottle, moving with the confident ease of hotel staff. But something about his presence felt different, more intimate, then professional. "They said you were waiting," he said softly, his voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't place. I should have corrected him, should have explained that my husband would return any moment. But the champagne had loosened something inside me, and his eyes held mine with surprising intensity. "I wasn't expecting— Room service can be full service here," he said, setting the bucket beside the jacuzzi. "If you're interested." The words hung between us, loaded with implication. I knew I should ask him to leave, should call for Blake. Instead, I watched him roll up his sleeves and test the water temperature with his fingertips. "The water's perfect," I managed. He smiled and sat on the jacuzzi's edge where Blake had been moments before. "May I join you?" I didn't answer with words. Something deep inside me, something I'd buried under years of predictable routine, nodded for me. He slipped into the water beside me, still wearing his dark slacks and white shirt. The fabric clung to his chest as he settled into the heat. His proximity sent electricity through the bubbling water. "What's your name?" he asked, moving closer. "Amanda." The word felt foreign, like I was introducing a version of myself I'd never met. His hand found my shoulder, fingers tracing the line of my collarbone with deliberate slowness. "Beautiful Amanda. Your husband has excellent taste." The mention of Blake should have stopped everything. Instead, it sent a thrill through me that I couldn't deny or understand. "He's inside," I whispered. "I know." His other hand joined the first, framing my face. "He sent me." The revelation hit like cold water in the warm pool. Blake had arranged this. The careful inspection of the suite, the champagne, the mysterious errand inside, all of it had been orchestrated. "He's watching," the stranger continued, his thumb brushing my lower lip. "He wants to see you happy." I glanced toward the suite's windows. The interior lights were off, but I could make out a silhouette against the glass. Blake stood motionless, observing. The stranger's lips found mine. The kiss was gentle at first, then deeper as I responded despite every rational thought screaming protest. His hands moved with practiced skill, finding places that made me gasp against his mouth. What followed happened in a haze of steam and starlight, water concealing what shouldn't be concealed, bubbles masking what couldn't be masked. I crossed a line I'd never imagined crossing, with my husband watching from the shadows. And I didn't want it to stop. Afterward, the stranger dressed quickly, professionally. Water dripped from his clothes onto the terrace stones. He leaned down and kissed my forehead with surprising tenderness. "Thank you," he said simply, then disappeared into the suite. I remained in the jacuzzi, my body still humming with sensations I couldn't process. The city lights seemed brighter now, the night air sharper against my flushed skin. What had I done? What had we done? The terrace door slid open. Blake emerged, moving slowly, deliberately. In his hand, I noticed the small device he'd been checking earlier. Its screen glowed softly in the darkness. "That was beautiful," he said, settling on the jacuzzi's edge where the stranger had sat. "Blake? Don't apologize." His voice carried a quality I'd never heard before, satisfaction mixed with something deeper. "I've been wanting this for so long." "Wanting what?" He held up the device. "To see you free, uninhibited, the way you were just now." The implications crashed over me like cold waves. "Were you recording?" "Every moment." His thumb traced the screen's edge. "You were magnificent, Amanda. More alive than I've seen you in years." I stared at him, this man I'd been married to for 8 years, trying to reconcile the Blake I knew with the one sitting before me. The calm exterior I'd always found reassuring now seemed calculated, almost predatory. "How long have you been planning this?" "Months. I researched the hotel, Found Marcus through their discreet services menu. Everything tonight was designed for you. For me, or for you? His smile was gentle but uncompromising. Both. We both got what we needed. The water suddenly felt too hot, too confining. I needed space to think, to process what had happened and what it meant for us. I climbed out of the jacuzzi, wrapping myself in the plush robe Blake had left on a nearby chair. My legs felt unsteady, whether from the hot water or the emotional earthquake, I couldn't tell. "Talk to me," I said, settling into one of the terrace chairs. "Really, talk to me." Blake remained at the water's edge, the device now dark in his hands. "I've had these fantasies for years, watching you with someone else, seeing you experience pleasure without holding back." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew you'd think it was wrong, perverted." He looked up at me, vulnerability replacing the earlier satisfaction. "But tonight, seeing you with Marcus, I realized it's not about degradation or infidelity. It's about freedom." The recording device sat between us like a third presence. I wanted to demand he delete whatever he'd captured, but part of me was curious about what I'd looked like in that moment of abandon. "What happens now?" I asked. "That's up to you." Blake stood, water dripping from his feet onto the stone. "We can pretend tonight never happened, go back to our regular life. Or we explore this together. There are clubs, private parties, couples who share our interests." His eyes held mine steadily. "I want to watch you discover parts of yourself you didn't know existed." The proposal should have horrified me. Instead, I felt a flutter of excitement that I couldn't quite suppress. The woman who had responded to Marcus's touch wasn't someone I recognized, but she felt more authentic than the Amanda who went through daily routines without passion. "I need time to think." "Of course, but Amanda..." He moved closer, kneeling beside my chair. "Don't think too long. Life's too short to deny what makes us feel alive." We moved inside without speaking. The suite felt different now, charged with new possibilities and unspoken agreements. Blake headed for the bathroom while I sat on the bed's edge, trying to organize my scattered thoughts. The woman in the jacuzzi had been me, but also not me. She'd been uninhibited, responsive, hungry for touch in ways I'd forgotten were possible. The memory sent heat through my body that had nothing to do with the hot water. Blake emerged wearing a hotel robe, his hair still damp. He sat beside me, close enough that I could smell his familiar cologne mixed with chlorine. "What did you think about while you were watching?" I asked. "How beautiful you looked. How alive." His hand found mine. How much I wanted to be part of it. Part of it? How? "Next time, I want to be in the jacuzzi with both of you." The words hung in the air between us, a bridge to a future I couldn't quite envision but found myself considering. The idea should have repulsed me, but instead it sent a thrill through my body that I couldn't deny. Would Marcus be willing? He specializes in couples. This is what he does. Blake's thumb traced circles on my palm. "But only if you want it. Only if it excites you the way it excites me." I thought about Marcus's hands, his mouth, the way he'd made me feel desired in a way that transcended ordinary attraction. Then I imagined Blake there too, participating instead of just observing. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "You don't have to decide tonight." "But Amanda, what happened out there? That was just the beginning. There's so much more we could explore together." The promise in his voice was intoxicating. For years, our intimate life had been comfortable but predictable. Tonight had shattered those boundaries completely. Blake reached into his robe pocket and withdrew the second keycard, the one he'd kept when we checked in. He placed it on the nightstand between us. "Marcus left this for you," he said. "Room 847. in case you want to continue the conversation privately. I stared at the plastic rectangle, understanding its significance. It represented choice, agency, the power to decide how far this exploration would go. He's still here? Until tomorrow morning. He thought you might want to talk without me present, to process what happened on your own terms. The consideration surprised me. Throughout the evening, I'd felt like a participant in Blake's fantasy rather than the author of my own desires. The keycard suggested Marcus understood the difference. Would you be okay with that? Me going to see him alone? Blake's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. It would be difficult, but I want you to feel free to make your own choices. That's the whole point. I picked up the keycard, feeling its weight. Such a small thing to carry such enormous implications. What if I decide I want to stop here? Go back to how things were? Then we stop. But his eyes betrayed doubt about whether that was truly possible. Though I don't think either of us can unknow what we learned tonight. He was right. The woman who had responded to Marcus's touch wasn't going to disappear just because we returned to our normal routine. She was part of me now, demanding acknowledgement. I need some air, I said, standing. The terrace? Just the hallway. To clear my head. Blake nodded, though I could see him struggling with the idea of me wandering the hotel alone. I slipped on clothes and took the keycard, not committing to anything but keeping the option open. The hallway was quiet, elegant. I walked toward the elevators, then past them to the stairwell. 8 floors up seemed manageable. Room 847 was identical to ours, but felt completely different. Marcus had dimmed the lights and opened the terrace doors. A bottle of champagne sat in an ice bucket on the small table, the same brand Blake had ordered earlier. I wasn't sure you'd come, Marcus said, closing the door behind me. I wasn't sure either. He'd changed into jeans and a simple sweater, looking less like professional entertainment and more like someone I might meet at a coffee shop. The transformation was disarming. How do you feel about what happened? The question was direct but gentle. I appreciated that he didn't assume or project, just asked. Confused, exhilarated, guilty. I sat in the chair by the window. How do you do this? Navigate these situations? Carefully, with respect for everyone involved. He poured 2 glasses of champagne, offering me one. Your husband loves you very much. This isn't about replacing what you have. It's about expanding it. Have you done this before? With other couples? It's part of what I do, yes. But tonight felt different. He sat across from me, maintaining respectful distance. You weren't performing for him. You were discovering something for yourself. The observation was astute and uncomfortable. Is that unusual? More than you might think. Many couples get lost in the performance aspect, trying to fulfill fantasies without exploring authentic desire. He sipped his champagne. You weren't performing tonight. You were present. The distinction mattered more than I'd realized. What I'd experienced with Marcus hadn't been about pleasing Blake or fulfilling his voyeuristic needs. It had been about my own awakening to possibilities I'd never considered. He wants to join us next time. How do you feel about that? Terrified. Intrigued. I met his eyes. Would you be willing? His smile was warm, understanding. If that's what you both want, yes. But Amanda, make sure it's what you want, not just what you think he wants. I returned to our suite as the first light touched the terrace. Blake was awake, sitting in the chair where I'd been hours earlier. The recording device lay on the table beside him, its screen dark. How was your conversation? Illuminating. I sat on the bed, facing him. He's a good man, thoughtful. I'm glad. Blake's relief was palpable. I was worried you might feel used, manipulated. I did, initially. But talking to Marcus helped me understand the difference between being used and being desired. Blake leaned forward. And which was tonight? Both. You used me to fulfill your fantasy. But Marcus desired me as a person, not just as an object for your viewing pleasure. The words stung him. I could see it in the way his shoulders tensed. But they needed to be said. I'm sorry, that wasn't my intention. I know, but if we're going to explore this further, we need clear boundaries. This can't just be about your fantasies. What do you want? I thought about the woman in the jacuzzi, the one who had responded without inhibition or calculation. I want to meet her again, the woman I was tonight, but on my terms. Blake nodded slowly. What would that look like? I don't know yet, but the next time we do this, if there is a next time, I choose when and how. I picked up the recording device. And I decide what happens to this. His eyes widened as I held the device over the terrace railing. For a moment, I considered dropping it, erasing the evidence of my transformation. But that would be denying what had happened, and denial felt like cowardice. Instead, I brought it back inside and handed it to him. Keep it. But understand that it belongs to both of us now. The morning sun streamed through the suite's windows as we packed our bags. The terrace looked innocent in daylight, just a hot tub and some patio furniture. Hard to believe it had been the site of such profound personal revolution just hours earlier. Blake moved quietly, respectfully, as if afraid to disturb the fragile new understanding between us. I appreciated his caution, but I was stronger now than I'd been 12 hours ago. I've been thinking about what you said, he said, folding his shirts with unusual care. About this being on your terms. And? I want you to know that I'm prepared to follow your lead, whatever pace you want to set. I zipped my overnight bag, considering his words. The Blake who had orchestrated last night's encounter was still there, but so was the vulnerable man who genuinely wanted my happiness. There's a club in the city, I said. Marcus mentioned it, a place where couples explore together. Blake's hands stilled on his suitcase. You want to go? I want to research it, learn about it. Maybe visit, just to observe? I met his eyes. But if we do this, we do it as equals. No more surprises, no more manipulation. Agreed. We finished packing in comfortable silence. The keycard to Marcus's room sat on the nightstand where I'd left it. I picked it up, then slipped it into my purse. Not because I planned to use it, but because it represented something important, the power to choose my own path forward. At checkout, the same clerk processed our bill with professional discretion. If he knew about the suite's special services, he gave no indication. I hope you enjoyed your stay, he said, handing Blake the receipt. Life-changing, I replied, earning a surprised glance from my husband. In the car, Blake pulled out his device one final time. Should I delete it? I considered the question seriously. The recording represented both violation and liberation, evidence of a night that had fundamentally altered who I understood myself to be. Not yet, I said, but ask me again in a month. He nodded and put the device away. As we drove home, I watched the city pass by our windows, knowing that the woman returning was different from the one who had left yesterday. The question now was what she would do with her newfound understanding of her own desires. The answer, I realized, was entirely up to me. The weeks that followed were a study in contradiction. I moved through my daily routines with the same efficiency I'd always prided myself on, yet beneath the surface, everything felt different. The morning coffee tasted sharper. Colors seemed more vivid. Even mundane conversations with colleagues carried an undercurrent of possibility that hadn't existed before. The patience of someone who understood transformation takes time. He didn't push, didn't ask probing questions about what I was thinking or feeling. Instead, he simply existed alongside me as I navigated this new landscape of self-awareness. 3 weeks after that night, I found myself standing in front of my bedroom mirror, studying my reflection with new eyes. The woman looking back at me was the same one who had always been there, but now I could see layers I'd never acknowledged before. The careful control I'd maintained over every aspect of my life suddenly felt less like strength and more like a cage I'd built for myself. That evening, as we sat on the couch reading, him with his architectural journals, me with a novel I couldn't quite focus on, I broke the comfortable silence. "I've been thinking about what you said," I began, not looking up from my book. "About asking again in a month." Marcus set down his magazine. "And?" I closed the novel and turned to face him fully. "I think I understand now why you waited so long to show me that side of yourself. It wasn't just about trusting me. It was about knowing I was ready to trust myself." He nodded slowly. "You've always been so certain about who you are, what you want. I needed to be sure you were ready to discover there might be more. And if there is more, if I want to explore it?" The question hung between us like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Marcus reached over and took my hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my palm. "Then we explore it together. At whatever pace feels right for you." I squeezed his fingers, feeling something settle into place inside me. Not the rigid certainty I'd always clung to, but something more fluid and honest. "I love that you never tried to change me," I said. "You just waited for me to discover I might want to change myself." "That's not change," he replied softly. "That's just becoming more of who you already are." Later that night, as we prepared for bed, I caught sight of the small wooden box on his dresser, the one he'd returned the silk ties to after that first night. This time, instead of looking away, I held his gaze in the mirror as he noticed me noticing. "Soon?" he asked. I smiled, feeling a familiar flutter of anticipation mixed with something new, the excitement of a woman ready to surprise herself. "Soon," I agreed, and meant it completely. The woman in the mirror smiled back, and for the first time in years, I genuinely liked what I saw.